That I reserve and yield back to the gentlelady from California. Thank her for her leadership.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee, for that very comprehensive statement about our shero, Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. You certainly are the epitome of who she was. And I'm so happy that you raised some of the issues and some of her quotes, because she told me personally that she said, Barbara, she said, these rules and policies weren't made for you and I. And she said, don't go along to get along. She said, if you get behind these closed doors in any capacity, you've got to fight to change the rules of the game. You've got to fight the systemic issues. Don't tinker around the edges. And I say that because, once again, when I started, I mentioned the fact that the first Congress was held in 1789, right? Shirley Chisholm was elected in 1968. Our country lost so much during that period because there were no black women right here in this House of Representatives. So we have to always remember the power of the moment when Shirley was elected to Congress and then running for president. So thank you again, Congresswoman Jackson-Lee. Congresswoman Lucy McBath, another trailblazer who has shattered a heck of a lot of glass ceilings, first of all, and who has been bold and determined and persistent in making her community and this country a better place. And I'm so glad that she's with us tonight. From the great state of Georgia, Congresswoman Lucy McBath.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to thank you so much to my esteemed colleague, Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee speaks for me tonight, and also Sheila Jackson-Lee. Thank you both so much for leading us in this commemoration tonight of our shero, Shirley Chisholm, and also grateful for the words that were spoken earlier by our leader, our shero of the Congressional Black Caucus, Joyce Beatty. Black History Month is a time for us to commemorate all those who came before us and to celebrate those who helped pave the path of progress that we found and find ourselves on today. Shirley Chisholm is truly one of those trailblazers. She was a woman who lived her truth and told her story boldly, time and time again. She was a trailblazer ahead of her time, who had a deep and lasting impact on our communities, on our country, and most specifically on communities of color. And it's not hard today to see that very impact. We now have a new generation of leaders who are shaping the policy of this nation's future, who look to the past and continue to look to leaders like Shirley Chisholm to see all the places that we still need to go. And yes, we have a long way to go. Young women around the world, and especially young women of color, have been forever inspired by her example. With all the barriers that she broke down, it can be easy to forget all that she did, all that she helped to build. Shirley was instrumental in strengthening voting rights. She was a force in demanding women's rights. And she was a leader in the fight for civil rights. It was a way that she worked all those years ago that has shown time and time again why we must continue these very same fights today. In my home state of Georgia, we are at the forefront of the fight for voting rights once again. We are again fighting against attempts at the worst voter suppression we have seen since Jim Crow. And at a time when our voting rights are under attack, we must once again lead in the efforts to protect these very sacred rights. So to all the women of color who have followed in Shirley's footsteps, the work that you do has never been more important than it is now. The times have found us, and it is these moments that we must continue to rise to this occasion. We have been prepared for this moment, a moment that beckons us to fight for equality and strive for justice, the equality and the justice that every one of us deserves. That preparation is because of leaders like Shirley Chisholm. And now, because the leaders of tomorrow grew up watching the leaders of yesterday, we will continue to make indelible marks on the world. Because of women like Shirley Chisholm, women of color have found their own power to stand up and to speak out and to advocate for the change that we know is possible, but more so the change that we know is necessary. So as we continue to follow in the footsteps of the giants who came before us, as we honor and celebrate the titans of the movement, I want to thank each and every person who wakes up every day in this country and does this work. Because this work is not easy, but change has only ever come from those who have brought their lived experiences into these halls of power. For all of you in this chamber, for the brave Black women who have carried this country forward, I want to say to each of you, I want to say that the work that you are doing as women and as women of color has never been more important. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I would not be here had it not been for you. I want to say how proud I am of each of your accomplishments, of your triumphs, and your successes. And I want you to remember that we are all doing the best that we can, and that each day God continues to give us new grace. As we move forward, we must be courageous in the fight for justice, human rights, and a future that celebrates the diversity and the power of who we are as a people. We should all strive to extend the path that Shirley helped build for us to follow. We should all strive to be like Shirley and be our best. With that, I yield back.
Share a story with you, which reminds me of you, that happened during Shirley's campaign. Because I know your district, and I know how you fight each and every day to bring people together, and how you care about all people, humanity. You care about people regardless of party affiliations, regardless of background. And I know that's how you do your work, and that's how you're so effective as a Black woman. Shirley Chisholm, during her campaign, George Wallace was running for president also. He was shot, and he was hospitalized. He was paralyzed. This is in the middle of the campaign. Congresswoman Chisholm suspended her campaign for a few days, and she went to visit that segregationist George Wallace. I mean, I was ready to leave. I said, no, there's no way that my first campaign, this Black woman, this shero of mine, is going down to see this man who has blocked African Americans from going to school, who has sick dogs on him, who's a horrible human being. And so I talked to her and said, I can't deal with this, Mrs. Chisholm. I was so angry for that decision. And I'm thinking of you now, and thinking of the context in which we live in terms of so much hate out there. Because she said to me, she said, little girl, even though I was grown on with 2 little kids, she said, remember, we're all human beings. She said, maybe I can teach him something and help him regain his humanity. I said, well, he never had any. He was a bad man. And she went on to say, she said, I know you're angry. She says, I know people are really angry who support me. She says, but you have to rise to the occasion if you're a leader, and you have to try to break down some of these barriers. She said, you have to break through and try to enlighten other people who may hate you. I said, no, that's not good enough. He'll never, ever come around, and I'm really angry. But she asked me to stay on with her campaign, so I begrudgingly did. But what happened was she was able, and I'm a good friend with George Wallace's daughter, Peggy Wallace Kennedy, who is a fighter for racial justice, who's a phenomenal woman in Alabama, and she's a good friend of mine. And she told me just recently, she says, honey, she said, you know, I was at that bedside when Shirley Chisholm visited my daddy. And she talked to him, and she told him what terrible things he had done. And she asked him to please, please, please understand that black people deserved justice and equality. And she didn't know whether or not she was making an impact on him or not. But later, I still say too little, too late. He went to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in his wheelchair and rolled down the aisle and apologized for all of his misdeeds. And they became friends from afar. And he got a lot of the Southern folks, members, to sign on to her legislation for domestic workers and for all of her bills that she was working on that she needed Southern Dixiecrats to support. And I share that story now because, you know, that seems like something that we've forgotten how to do. I mean, I know I have. It's something that she taught me because not only did she, was she responsible for this apology, again, too little, too late. It showed me that you've got to step out of your comfort zone like you do and hopefully see some good in people who are your adversaries. And so I wanted to, as you were talking, I wanted to share that because I was personally involved with that story, and I want to salute Peggy Wallace Kennedy tonight because she has really led a life that has been a life of making sure that every barrier against African Americans and people of color are dismantled in this country. So thank you again.
Thank you for
here.
sharing that. Thank you.
Let me now, is Congresswoman Jackson Lee, okay, we'll go to another fighter who has just come here from the great state of Ohio, who has a remarkable record fighting for voting rights and justice, and is a woman who serves her community in ways that every member of Congress should serve their community. Congresswoman Shontel Brown, who I think has been here for years now, but she really has